I stared at the blueprints spread across Ryan's desk, my coffee growing cold in my hand. The familiar scent of his leather office chair mixed with fresh ink from the architectural plans. But something else caught in my throat, the bitter taste of betrayal. There, sketched in precise blue lines, was our dream house transformed into a nightmare, a separate wing for his parents. Complete with a private entrance and kitchenette. My name is Maya, and I thought I knew what kind of life I was building. Funny how paper can shatter certainty. What do you think? Ryan's voice startled me. He stood in the doorway, grinning like he'd just given me a gift. Mother helped design the layout. She has excellent taste, don't you agree? I traced the lines with my finger, counting the rooms that had been sacrificed to accommodate Helen's vision. Our planned art studio, gone. The sunroom we'd dreamed about, replaced by their private living area. When were you planning to tell me about this? Tell you? Maya, I'm telling you now. He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Besides, Mother thinks. Of course she does. The coffee cup clattered against the desk as I set it down. She thinks, she plans, she decides. And you just go along with it all, don't you? Ryan's smile faltered. They're getting older. We need to think about their future. Their future? My voice cracked. What about our future? The one we planned together, Ryan. Remember that conversation? Just us, building our life, our family? He moved closer, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. It's not that simple, he said. Actually, it is. You made a choice. You just didn't include me in it. Mother says. Stop. The word came out sharp enough to make him flinch. Just stop. I gathered the blueprints, rolling them carefully. 3 years of marriage, and I'd never noticed how Ryan's spine disappeared whenever Helen entered the equation. Or maybe I'd noticed, but chosen to ignore it, hoping love would be enough to break her hold on him. Maya, don't be difficult about this. His tone shifted, echoing Helen's patronizing lilt. It's the practical solution. Mother says we'll save money on elderly care in the future, and... Does she know about the fertility treatments? The question hung between us like smoke. Does she know we've been trying for a baby? His silence was answer enough. Right. I placed the rolled blueprints in his hands. Because that's none of her business. Just like this house should have been none of her business. You're overreacting. Ryan's face hardened. Mother only wants what's best for us. No, she wants what's best for her. And you're too scared to say no. I walked past him, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Each step felt like a countdown, though to what, I wasn't sure yet. Behind me, Ryan called out, "Where are you going?" To call my sisters. I paused at the door. Someone needs to hear my voice in this family, since you've clearly stopped listening. As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a text from Helen. Darling, I hope Ryan showed you the plans. I've already contacted the contractors. Isn't it exciting? I stared at the message, a cold clarity washing over me. She'd planned this perfectly, the announcement, the contractors, the timing. She'd orchestrated every detail, knowing Ryan would fold like a house of cards. Well, Helen Carter was about to learn that not everyone in this family danced to her tune. I opened my contacts and called Emma, my eldest sister. Hey, I said when she answered. Remember when you said I'd eventually have to choose between my marriage and my self-respect? Oh, Maya. Emma's voice softened with understanding. What did they do? They're about to learn exactly what happens when you push someone too far. I stepped into the elevator, watching the doors close on my old life. Want to help me plan a little revenge? The dining room gleamed with Helen's signature perfection, crystal glasses catching light, silverware aligned with military precision. I watched her arrange fresh-cut roses in the centerpiece, each stem positioned just so, while her words sliced through the air like paper cuts. Maya, darling, I noticed you've been rather quiet about the house plans. Surely you see how perfect the arrangement will be? Ryan tells me you're still trying for a baby, having experienced hands nearby will be invaluable. My fork scraped against bone china. Across the table, Emma's eyes widened at Helen's calculated strike. Even Chloe, usually quick with a retort, held her breath. Actually, Helen, I prefer to keep our fertility journey private. I smiled, matching her saccharine tone. But thank you for your concern. Ryan cleared his throat. Mother means well, Maya. Of course she does. I cut into my meat with precise movements. Just like she meant well when she rearranged our wedding seating chart without asking. Or when she redecorated our guest room while we were on vacation. Paul Carter studied his wine glass, a familiar retreat. Helen's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. Oh, you're still upset about that? I simply saw an opportunity to improve things. The room looks much better now, doesn't it, Ryan? It does look nice, Ryan mumbled. Chloe's fork clattered against her plate. Funny, I remember Maya mentioning she was planning to turn that room into a nursery. Helen's smile never wavered. Well, with the new house plans, we'll have plenty of room for everything. I've already selected the perfect shade of yellow for the nursery walls. Gender neutral, of course. My chest tightened. I felt Emma's foot press against mine under the table, a silent signal of support. Yellow? I set down my knife. That's interesting, considering Ryan and I hadn't discussed nursery colors yet. With anyone. Mother has excellent taste, Ryan interjected. She's only trying to help. Help? The word tasted bitter. Like moving into our home without discussing it with me first? That kind of help? Silence dropped like a curtain. Helen dabbed her lips with her napkin, every movement calculated. Ryan, darling, you did tell Maya about our discussion, didn't you? Discussion? I turned to my husband. What discussion? Ryan's face flushed. I was going to mention it. Mother suggested we could help with the mortgage payments if they move in immediately, Helen finished, triumph glinting in her eyes. The contractors can start next week. We'll need to pack quickly, of course, but I'm sure you understand the urgency. The room spun. Next week. They'd planned it all, the renovations, the move, my future, without a single word to me. Maya? Emma's voice carried a warning. My hands were shaking. I stood, my chair scraping against hardwood. Excuse me. I need some air. Don't be dramatic, dear. Helen's voice followed me. This is what family does. We take care of each other. I turned back, meeting her gaze. Is that what this is, Helen? Taking care of family? Or making sure you never lose control of your son? Maya! Ryan stood, his face darkening. Apologize to Mother. Chloe jumped up. Apologize? Are you kidding me? Stay out of this, Ryan snapped. Or what? Chloe challenged. You'll let your mother handle it? I walked out, leaving chaos erupting behind me. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter, breathing deeply. Footsteps approached Emma's measured tread. You okay? No. I laughed, the sound hollow. But I'm done pretending to be. What are you going to do? Through the kitchen window, I watched Helen's car in our driveway, already taking up space, already claiming territory. Remember that lawyer you mentioned? The one who handled your friend's divorce? Emma's intake of breath was sharp. Maya. I need her number. I turned to face my sister. And I need you to help me move some things out of the house. Tonight. You're sure? From the dining room, I heard Helen's voice rising. Ryan, darling, you need to control your wife's outbursts. This behavior simply won't do when we're living together. I've never been more sure of anything. I pulled out my phone. It's time to show Helen Carter what happens when you push someone too far. Emma nodded, understanding, darkening her features. I'll call Chloe. We'll handle this together. Behind us, the perfect family dinner continued to unravel, each thread pulling loose with satisfying finality. The contractors' trucks lined our driveway like vultures, their presence mocking every promise Ryan had ever made. I sat in my car, watching them unload equipment while Helen directed traffic like a symphony conductor. 3 days after the dinner disaster, and they were already tearing into our home. My phone buzzed, another message from Ryan, please come home. We need to talk about this rationally. Rational. Like it was rational to ambush your wife with renovation plans. Like it was rational to let your mother orchestrate your entire life. I stepped out of the car just as Helen's voice carried across the lawn. The wall between the kitchen and dining room needs to come down first. Ryan agrees, it'll open up the space beautifully. Does he? The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Helen turned, her surprise quickly masked by that practiced smile. Maya, darling. How wonderful. You can help us decide on the new fixtures. The fixtures for the house you're hijacking? I moved closer, noting how the contractors suddenly found their blueprints fascinating. Or should I say, the house you've already hijacked? Now, Maya, Helen started, but Ryan's voice cut through. There you are. He emerged from the garage, tension visible in his shoulders. Where have you been? I've been calling all morning. Consulting a lawyer. The words dropped like stones into still water. Helen's smile flickered. Ryan's face drained of color. Don't be ridiculous, Helen recovered first. Ryan, tell her she's being ridiculous. But Ryan just stared at me, something like fear creeping into his eyes. Maya, whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking, I just heard you through the bedroom window last night. My voice stayed steady, even as my hands shook. You and your mother, planning my life away while I was supposedly asleep. Helen's composure cracked. You were eavesdropping? I was in my own bedroom. But please. Tell me again how I'm getting that promotion at work, the one you convinced Ryan I shouldn't take because it might interfere with having children? Ryan stepped forward. That's not what. Or maybe explain how you've already enrolled us in your country club, using our joint account? I pulled out my phone, showing the bank statement. Funny, I don't remember agreeing to that either. A gift, Helen snapped. For both of you. Ryan understands the importance of maintaining certain social connections. Ryan understands whatever you tell him to understand. That's enough. Ryan's voice cracked like a whip. Mother, please give us a minute. Helen hesitated, clearly unused to being dismissed. Darling. Please. She retreated, but not before shooting me a look that promised consequences. The contractors suddenly remembered urgent tasks elsewhere. Maya, Ryan's voice softened. You're upset, I get it. But this is what families do, they support each other, they stay together. No, Ryan. This is what your mother does. She controls, she manipulates, and you let her. She loves us. She loves controlling us. I met his gaze. When was the last time you made a decision without consulting her first? His silence answered for him. The fertility treatments, I pressed on. Did you tell her how you've been skipping appointments? How you've been sabotaging our chances because she thinks we should wait until she moves in? Ryan paled. How did you? Dr. Patterson called yesterday. She was concerned about your cancellations. My throat tightened. 3 years, Ryan. 3 years I've been trying to build a family with you, while you've been building a prison with her. It's not like that. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Mother just wants. Stop. The word came out like a bullet. Just stop saying what she wants. What do you want, Ryan? Do you even know anymore? Behind him, Helen watched from the window, her shadow falling across the lawn like a stain. Ryan's face crumpled, then hardened, a transformation I'd seen too many times before. I want you to stop fighting this, he said finally. Mother knows what's best for us. I nodded slowly, something breaking and reforming inside me. Goodbye, Ryan. Maya. The lawyer will contact you tomorrow. I turned away, my steps steady. I hope someday you realize what you lost, and who made you lose it. His voice followed me, weak and uncertain. What are you doing? What you never could, I called back. I'm choosing myself. The contractor's hammers began their symphony of destruction as I drove away, leaving behind the ruins of a life I'd thought was mine. Emma's spare bedroom felt like a confessional, scattered with remnants of my married life, photo albums, wedding gifts. The vintage jewelry box Ryan gave me on our first anniversary. Each item carried the weight of memories I couldn't quite bring myself to discard. My phone lit up with another message from Paul Carter. Maya, please call me. There are things you need to know. I stared at the text, remembering all the times Paul had stayed silent. All the family dinners where he'd retreated behind his newspaper while Helen orchestrated her schemes. Why speak up now? The doorbell rang. Through the window, I spotted Ryan's car idling in the driveway. Don't answer it, Chloe called from the hallway. He's tried this at my place twice already. But something in me needed to face him. I opened the door to find Ryan clutching a familiar leather-bound book, our wedding album. You left this, he said softly. I left a lot of things. He shifted, uncomfortable in a way I'd never seen before. Father wants to talk to you. I saw his message. It's about Mother. Ryan's voice cracked slightly. About what she did to his first wife. The world tilted sideways. His what? Please, Maya. Just talk to him. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Paul Carter in a coffee shop downtown, watching him methodically shred a paper napkin. Helen wasn't my first wife, he began, eyes fixed on the growing pile of paper strips. Caroline and I were married for 3 years before I met Helen. She was different. Independent, like you. My coffee grew cold as Paul's story unfolded. How Helen had started as his secretary, how she'd slowly infiltrated their lives, offering to help when Caroline got sick. How she'd taken over their finances, their medical decisions, their future plans. By the time I realized what was happening, Caroline had signed everything over to Helen's care. The house, the accounts. Even her life insurance. Paul's hands trembled. She died thinking she was protecting me, ensuring I'd be taken care of. And you married Helen. 6 months later. His shame filled the space between us. I told myself it was grief, that I needed someone to help me through it. But Helen. She'd planned it all, every detail. Why are you telling me this now? Paul finally met my gaze. Because yesterday, I found these in Helen's study. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of my medical records, fertility clinic appointments, bank statements. And something else, documentation for a trust fund in Ryan's name, accessible only if he remained married and living with his parents. She's been tracking everything, Paul whispered. Just like with Caroline. My hands shook as I read the documents. Does Ryan know about this? He knows about the trust. Not about Caroline. Paul leaned forward. Helen's already talking about your fragile mental state, about how you might need her to manage your affairs during this difficult time. Ice spread through my veins as I remembered Helen's recent suggestions about joint accounts, about combining our insurance policies. I should have warned you sooner, Paul continued. But Helen. She has ways of making people disappear. Legally, financially, socially. Caroline learned that too late. My phone buzzed, Helen's number. The text read, "Darling, I'm worried about you. Let me help manage things until you're thinking clearly again. Ryan agrees it's for the best." Another buzz, my bank notifying me of a large withdrawal attempt, pending approval. "She's already starting," Paul said quietly. I gathered the documents with steady hands, a strange calm settling over me. "Thank you, Paul, for finally speaking up. What will you do?" I stood, remembering the lawyer's business card in my wallet, thinking of the detailed records I'd kept of every manipulation, every financial move Helen had made. I'm going to do what Caroline never got the chance to do. I met Paul's gaze. I'm going to destroy Helen Carter's perfect world. As I walked out, my phone buzzed again. "Ryan, Mother says you're not well. Let us help you." I smiled, thinking of the evidence in my hands, of Caroline's ghost finally finding voice through Paul's confession. Helen Carter had spent years building her web of control. Now it was time to watch it burn. The storage unit's metal door groaned open, revealing the carefully organized pieces of my life. 3 weeks of secret trips, smuggling out photos, documents, and irreplaceable mementos while Helen's renovation crew gutted our home. Emma stood beside me, clipboard in hand, methodically checking off items. "Bank statements?" she asked. "Safe deposit box. Medical records?" "Copied and secured." I lifted a box labeled "Kitchen, Fragile," along with Paul's evidence about Caroline. Emma's pen paused. "You really think Helen would?" "She already is." I showed her my phone, another notification from the bank, another attempted withdrawal. "She's trying to drain the accounts before I can stop her." "Mrs. Carter?" A voice echoed through the storage facility. We froze. Helen's personal assistant rounded the corner, phone raised. "I thought I recognized your car." The flash went off before I could react. "Sorry to intrude," she smiled, all professional courtesy. "Mrs. Carter Sr. was concerned about your recent behavior. Just documenting for the family's peace of mind." She retreated, heels clicking against concrete, damage already done. "Maya." Emma's voice carried warning. "What just happened?" My phone buzzed. "Helen, darling, moving things without telling anyone?" "Ryan's so worried. Perhaps we should discuss power of attorney until you're feeling more stable." Another buzz. "Ryan, Mother's right. You're not thinking clearly. Let us help." "She's building a case," I whispered, the reality hitting like ice water. "Just like with Caroline. Making me look unstable, paranoid." "Then we move faster." Emma grabbed another box. "Chloe's meeting us at the lawyer's office in an hour." The drive downtown felt like crossing enemy territory. Every red light brought another text, another attempt to access my accounts. Helen's web tightening with each passing minute. In the lawyer's parking lot, Ryan waited, looking lost without Helen orchestrating his movements. "Maya, please." He stepped forward. "Whatever you're planning." "How's the trust fund, Ryan?" His face paled. "The one you get if you stay under Mommy's control?" "It's not like that." "Then what's it like?" "Explain it to me. Explain why you let her track my medical records, my bank accounts, my entire life." "She's protecting us." "Like she protected Caroline?" The name hit him like a slap. "What are you talking about?" "Ask your father." I moved past him, Emma flanking me. Better yet, ask Helen about her first victim. Maya! His voice cracked. Don't do this. We can fix things. I turned back, seeing the boy Helen had shaped, the man he'd never become. No, Ryan. You can't fix this, because you can't even see what's broken. Inside, Chloe waited with the lawyer, documents spread across the conference table. My phone buzzed again. Helen had escalated to calling mutual friends, expressing her concerns about my mental state. She's moving fast, the lawyer observed, reviewing Paul's evidence. But so are we. I signed paper after paper, each signature a brick in the wall between me and Helen's influence. Restraining orders, financial protections, medical directives explicitly banning Helen from any involvement. One last thing. The lawyer slid forward a final document. Your resignation letter. My hand hesitated over the paper. The marketing firm had been my sanctuary, my achievement independent of the Carters. Helen's already called them, Chloe said quietly. Expressed concerns about your stability, your ability to handle client accounts. Of course she had. Helen Carter left no stone unturned, no escape route unclosed. I signed, feeling something break and reform inside me. What now? Now? The lawyer gathered the documents. Now we let Helen think she's winning. While we prepare to take everything. My phone lit up with a final message from Helen. The contractors need your input on the nursery colors. Though given your current state, perhaps it's best if I make these decisions. Ryan agrees. I placed my phone face down, thinking of Caroline, of all the women Helen had crushed beneath her perfect facade. No more decisions, Helen, I whispered. No more control. The war was starting, and this time, Helen Carter wouldn't see the strike coming until it was too late. The moving trucks arrived at dawn, Helen's army of workers swarming our half-renovated house like ants. I watched from Emma's car as they carried in furniture I'd never seen, arranging Helen's life over the ashes of mine. You don't have to be here, Emma said softly. Yes, I do. Helen emerged from her Mercedes, directing traffic with imperial efficiency. Ryan trailed behind her, carrying a box labeled family photos, photos I knew wouldn't include me. My phone buzzed, a message from my lawyer, documents ready. Waiting for your signal. I stepped out of the car just as Helen was instructing someone about placement of her antique mirror. She spotted me in its reflection, her smile spreading like a crack in glass. Maya, darling. We were so worried. She glided forward, arms outstretched. The doctors said you might try something rash. Doctors? The ones we consulted about your condition. Her voice carried just far enough for the workers to hear. Don't worry, we've handled everything. Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. Mother's right. You need help. Like Caroline needed help? Helen's smile flickered. Ryan, darling, take those boxes inside. Maya and I need to talk. Once Ryan was gone, Helen's mask slipped. You've been quite troublesome lately. I learned from the best. Did you really think you could win? She produced a folder. Your medical records show a history of anxiety. Your recent behavior suggests paranoid tendencies. The bank has concerns about your financial decisions. All carefully orchestrated by you. I protect what's mine. Her eyes hardened. Ryan is mine. This house is mine. Your sad little attempts at independence are finished. Like you finished Caroline? The name hit harder this time. Helen stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. Paul should have kept his mouth shut. But it doesn't matter. No one believed Caroline either. Maya? Ryan called from the doorway. Mother, is everything okay? Perfect, darling. Helen's smile returned. Maya was just leaving. For good this time. I looked at Ryan, seeing the boy who'd once promised to love me, now just another piece in Helen's collection. Was any of it real? His eyes flickered with something, regret, maybe fear. But Helen cleared her throat, and he straightened. Mother knows best. Yes, I said quietly. She certainly does. I pulled out my phone, pressed send on a pre-written message. Seconds later, Helen's phone chimed. She checked it, frowning. What is this? Check your email. I watched her face as she read. Every manipulation documented. Every financial move tracked. Every conversation recorded. Including what you just said about Caroline. The color drained from her face. You wouldn't dare. The police have copies. So do the medical board and banking regulators. And Caroline's family. Mother? Ryan moved closer, uncertain. 1 hour, I said. That's how long you have before I release everything to the media. Helen's composure cracked. You stupid girl. I'll destroy you. Like you destroyed Caroline? That would be harder now. I nodded toward the street, where Paul sat in his car, watching. Your husband's testimony might complicate things. Paul would never. He already has. I stepped back. 1 hour, Helen. Tick-tock. I turned away, her threats following me like shadows. But halfway to Emma's car, Ryan caught my arm. Maya, please. Whatever you're doing. Check your trust fund, Ryan. I pulled free. See if it's worth the price of your soul. Helen's voice rose behind us, sharp with panic. Ryan. Get back here now. He hesitated, torn between two worlds. For a moment, I saw the man he could have been, the life we might have had. Then he turned away, returning to Helen's side like a trained dog. I got into Emma's car, watching Helen's perfect world begin to crumble. My phone buzzed with threats, promises, finally desperate pleas. You okay? Emma asked. I thought of Caroline, of all the women Helen had broken, of the life I'd almost lost to her web of control. No, I answered honestly. But I will be. The hour began to count down, and with it, Helen Carter's reign of manipulation. Sometimes, I realized, the greatest revenge isn't in destroying your enemy, but in forcing them to face their own reflection. 58 minutes into Helen's hour of reckoning, the Carter family lawyer arrived, clutching his briefcase like a shield. Behind him, Helen swept into the conference room, her perfect posture betraying only the slightest tremor. Ryan followed, pale but resolute, while Paul slipped in last, taking a seat beside my sisters. Let's discuss terms, Helen announced, as if she were still orchestrating a dinner party. I placed Caroline's photograph on the table. Helen's mask slipped for just a moment. I'm not here to negotiate. My voice remained steady. I'm here to end this. Everything can be negotiated. Helen's smile tightened. Name your price. Mother, Ryan started, but she silenced him with a look. The trust fund? Helen continued. The house? Both can be yours. Just delete those files. I slid forward a stack of documents. These aren't terms, Helen. These are consequences. The lawyer reviewed the papers, his expression darkening. Mrs. Carter, perhaps we should. Be quiet. Helen's composure cracked. Maya, darling, think carefully. You're destroying a family. No. I met her gaze. I'm freeing one. Ryan grabbed the documents, scanning them with growing horror. These accounts. Mother, what did you do? Protected you, Helen snapped. Everything I've done has been for you. Like Caroline? The words hung in the air. Tell him, Helen. Tell Ryan about your first victim. She was unstable, Helen hissed. Like you. Show him the trust fund conditions. I nodded to the lawyer. Show him how his own mother bought his obedience. Ryan's hands shook as he read the terms. His inheritance, his future, all contingent on remaining under Helen's control. You didn't protect him, I said softly. You imprisoned him. Ryan. Helen's voice hardened. Remember everything I've sacrificed for you. But Ryan was still reading, his world unraveling with each page. The fertility treatments. You told the doctors to. You weren't ready for children. Helen reached for him. I knew what was best. Like you knew what was best for Caroline? Paul's quiet voice cut through the room. Tell him the truth, Helen. Tell our son how his father's first wife really died. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Helen's perfect facade crumbled, revealing something desperate underneath. She was going to take Paul away. The words burst out like poison. She didn't understand family loyalty. Just like you, Maya. Always fighting, always questioning. So you destroyed her. I pushed forward the final document, Caroline's medical records. Gradually, systematically, until she had nothing left. I protected what was mine. Helen's fist struck the table. And I'll do it again. Ryan, tell them. Tell them I'm right. But Ryan was staring at his father, understanding dawning in his eyes. Dad? Paul met his son's gaze. I watched her do it once. I won't watch it happen again. The police have everything, I said quietly. The financial records, the medical manipulation, Caroline's case. It's over, Helen. Nothing's over. Helen straightened, reaching for her last weapon. Ryan, choose. Now. Ryan looked at his mother, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. Then he placed the trust fund documents on the table and stepped back. I choose freedom, he whispered. Helen's world collapsed in slow motion. She reached for the papers, for control, for anything to hold on to. But there was nothing left. You'll regret this, she threatened, but her voice had lost its power. I stood, gathering the evidence of her destruction. No, Helen. You'll regret not understanding that love isn't control. Family isn't ownership. And karma. I smiled, thinking of Caroline, of all the lives Helen had tried to break. Karma is watching. As security escorted Helen out, her threats fading down the hallway, Ryan caught my arm. Maya, don't. I pulled away gently. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. He nodded, understanding at last. Outside, Emma and Chloe waited with Paul. Behind us, Helen's perfect world continued to crumble, years of manipulation exposed to light. Was it worth it? Emma asked softly. I watched Ryan walk away, finally free from his mother's web, and thought of Caroline. Ask me tomorrow, I said. When Helen Carter wakes up to face the truth she's spent a lifetime hiding. The auction sign swayed in the autumn breeze, its red letters stark against the half-renovated facade of what was once my dream home. I watched from across the street as potential buyers filed in. Their whispers carrying fragments of the scandal that had brought the mighty Helen Carter to her knees. Emma touched my shoulder. Ready? I nodded, gripping Caroline's photograph in my pocket. The foyer still smelled of Helen's signature perfume, though she hadn't set foot here since the investigation began. Her carefully chosen wallpaper hung in strips, renovation dreams abandoned mid-transformation. Maya. Ryan's voice echoed from the kitchen. He looked smaller somehow, without Helen's shadow looming over him. I didn't expect you today. I came to return something. I placed a small key on the marble counter, the one Helen had given me on my wedding day. And to deliver this, I handed him Caroline's photograph. He studied it, his fingers tracing the edge of the frame. "She looks happy here," he said quietly. "She was. Before your mother decided she was a threat." I moved toward the window, watching another group of buyers arrive. "The house goes to auction tomorrow. Mother's under house arrest. The investigation." He swallowed hard. "They found others. Before Caroline." Of course they had. Helen Carter's web of destruction stretched back decades, each thread carefully woven and now finally unraveled. "The trust fund's gone," Ryan continued. "Everything she controlled, everything she built. Everything she stole," I corrected gently. He nodded, defeat etched in his features. "I keep asking myself when I lost my way. When I became what she wanted instead of who I was. The question isn't when you lost your way." I turned to face him. "It's whether you'll find it again." Through the window, I spotted Paul helping the auction team set up their signs. He caught my eye, nodding once, a gesture of gratitude, of understanding. He'd found his voice too late for Caroline, but just in time to help bring Helen's reign to an end. "I filed the final divorce papers," I said. "They'll arrive tomorrow." Ryan's hand tightened around Caroline's photograph. "Maya, I don't." I stepped back. Some apologies are better left unsaid. A commotion outside drew our attention. Helen's face splashed across someone's phone screen, news of her arrest making headlines again. The mighty Helen Carter, finally facing justice for decades of manipulation and fraud. Was it worth it? Ryan asked suddenly. The revenge? I thought of Caroline, of all the lives Helen had tried to break, of the freedom that came with finally standing up to her. It wasn't revenge, Ryan. I moved toward the door. It was justice. For Caroline, for your father, for everyone she tried to control. Even for you. Emma waited by the car, but I paused on the porch, taking in the house one last time. The renovations would never be completed, the dreams Helen tried to build on others' broken spirits crumbling like the stripped wallpaper inside. What will you do now? Ryan called after me. I smiled, thinking of the small apartment I'd bought, the marketing firm I was starting, the life I was building, this time on my own terms. I'm going to live, I answered simply. Something your mother never learned how to do. As we drove away, I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror. Helen's perfect world had shattered, but from its ruins, others would rise, Ryan, finding his own path, Paul, finally free from decades of guilt. Caroline's family, at last knowing the truth. You okay? Emma asked softly. I touched the empty spot where my wedding ring used to be, feeling lighter than I had in years. You know what, Em? I really am. The auction sign grew smaller behind us, its red letters fading into the distance. Sometimes, I realized, the greatest victory isn't in destroying your enemy's world, but in building your own, brick by brick, choice by choice. Free from the shadows of those who would cage you in their own fears. Helen Carter had spent a lifetime collecting broken spirits. In the end, it was her own spirit that shattered, leaving others to finally spread their wings and fly.
My name is Gina. And this is the story of how my life fell apart and then came back together. I'm 35 years old, and until recently, I thought I had it all figured out. I was the sales director at a large company, married to my college sweetheart, Mark, and we had just bought our first house. After graduation, I landed an entry-level job at a promising startup. I worked my way up the ladder, putting in long hours and sacrificing weekends. It paid off when I was promoted to sales director last year. Mark, on the other hand, had a harder time finding his footing. He bounced between a few jobs before settling as a shift supervisor at a mirror manufacturing company. Our best friends were another couple, Lisa and Tom. We met them at a neighborhood barbecue shortly after moving into our new house. Lisa was a stay-at-home wife, always impeccably dressed and with a spotless home. Tom was a successful entrepreneur who seemed to work as much as I did. When we bought our house, I was the one who qualified for the mortgage. I put it in my name and assumed all the responsibility for the payments. I didn't mind at the time, I was making good money, and I figured Mark would contribute when he could. As time went on, I noticed Mark becoming more and more dissatisfied with his job. He'd come home complaining about his boss, saying things like, "He's always on my case about everything. I can't do anything right," in his eyes. I tried to be supportive. "What happened this time?" I'd ask, setting aside whatever work I'd brought home. "He called me out for being 5 minutes late," Mark would huff. "As if that makes a difference. And then he had the nerve to tell me how to talk to the clients. I'd been doing this job for years." I'd listen and nod, but inside I was growing frustrated. These seemed like normal workplace interactions to me, not the personal attacks Mark made them out to be. One day, Mark came home earlier than usual. I was in the middle of a conference call, but excused myself when I saw his face. "What's wrong?" I asked, muting my laptop. "I quit," he said simply. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "You what?" I couldn't take it anymore. My boss made another comment about my attitude, and I just snapped. I told him where he could shove his job and walked out. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the panic rising in my chest. "Mark, we have a mortgage. We can't afford for you to be unemployed right now." He waved off my concern. "I'll find something better. Something where I'm appreciated." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just nodded and went back to my call. After Mark quit his job, our lives changed dramatically. I took on extra shifts and increased my workload, desperate to keep up with our mortgage payments and daily expenses. My days became a blur of meetings, sales calls, and late nights at the office. I was exhausted, but I didn't see any other choice. Meanwhile, Mark seemed to be in no hurry to find new employment. He'd occasionally mention an interview he'd been to, but there was always some reason it wasn't the right fit. The commute would be a nightmare, he'd say, or, "The boss seemed like a real jerk." I tried to be patient, but my frustration grew with each passing day. One evening, I came home late to find Mark lounging on the couch, watching TV. "Hey," I said, dropping my bag by the door. "Have you eaten?" He looked up at me, frowning. "No, I was waiting for you to cook something." I stared at him in disbelief. "Mark, it's 9 p.m. I've been working since 7 this morning. Why didn't you make dinner?" "Because that's your job," he snapped. "You're never home anymore, Gina. The house is a mess, there's no food in the fridge, and I can't remember the last time we had a proper meal together." I felt my temper rising. "My job? My job is keeping a roof over our heads and food on the table." "What exactly is your job right now, Mark?" "I'm looking for work," he shouted. "Do you think I enjoy sitting around all day? But I'm not going to settle for just any job. I deserve better than that." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "I understand that, but we can't afford for you to be so picky right now. We have bills to pay." "Always about the money with you," he muttered. "What happened to supporting each other through thick and thin?" "I am supporting us," I said quietly. "But I need you to meet me halfway. Please, just try harder to find something. Anything. We can reassess once we're more stable." Mark didn't respond. He just turned back to the TV, effectively ending the conversation. I went to bed hungry and angry that night, wondering how much longer I could keep this up. The next day, I met Lisa for coffee during my lunch break. She looked fresh and relaxed, her hair perfectly styled and her nails freshly manicured. "Gina, honey, you look exhausted," she said, concern in her voice. "Are you getting any sleep at all?" I sighed, sipping my double espresso. "Not much. Work's been crazy, and things at home are tense." Lisa reached out and patted my hand. You're working too hard. You need to take care of yourself, relax a little. Tom always says a happy wife makes for a happy life. I bit back a retort. Lisa meant well, but she had no idea what my life was like. It's not that simple for us right now, I said instead. But I'm sure things will get better soon. As the weeks went by, the tension in our house grew thicker. Mark's job search seemed to be going nowhere, and I was stretching myself thin, trying to keep everything afloat. Our conversations, when we had them, were short and often ended in arguments. One evening, I came home to find Mark dressed up, ready to go out. "Where are you going?" I asked, surprised. "Out with the guys," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "We're going to play golf." "Golf? At this hour?" I was skeptical, but too tired to argue. "Whatever. Have fun." As he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. But I pushed it aside, focusing instead on the mountain of work I'd brought home. The next day, I decided I needed a break. I took a rare day off from work and planned to surprise Mark with a weekend getaway. When I called to tell him, he seemed distracted. "This weekend? I can't. I've got plans with the guys again." I felt my heart sink. "Again? Can't you reschedule?" "No, it's important. Sorry, babe." He hung up before I could respond. Frustrated and hurt, I called Lisa. Maybe she and Tom would want to do something. "Oh, Gina," Lisa's voice was apologetic. "We'd love to, but Tom and I are visiting my parents this weekend." "Rain check?" I agreed, trying not to sound as disappointed as I felt. It seemed like everyone had plans except me. On a whim, I decided to go shopping. Maybe a little retail therapy would lift my spirits. As I was browsing through a department store, I heard a familiar voice. "Gina, what are you doing here?" I turned to see Tom, Lisa's husband, looking surprised and slightly uncomfortable. "Tom, I thought you and Lisa were visiting her parents this weekend?" His brow furrowed in confusion. "Her parents? No, we didn't have any plans. Lisa said she was spending the night at your place." My blood ran cold. "What? No, she's not with me. She told me you two were out of town." We found a quiet cafe and sat down. Tom looked grim as he spoke. "I've had suspicions for a while now," he said. "Lisa's been acting strange, always on her phone, making excuses to go out. I think our spouses might be having an affair." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I couldn't breathe. "No," I whispered. "They wouldn't." But even as I said it, pieces started falling into place. Mark's mysterious outings, Lisa's constant presence in our home, the way they looked at each other. Tom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm going to hire a private investigator. We need to know for sure. And we don't let on that we suspect anything. Can you do that, Gina?" I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. Yes, I can." As I drove home that evening, my mind was reeling. How had I not seen this coming? I walked into our house, half expecting to catch Mark and Lisa in the act. But the house was empty and quiet. Mark came home late, smelling of alcohol and mumbling about a great game of golf. The next 2 weeks were excruciating. I went through the motions of daily life, pretending everything was normal, while my insides churned with suspicion and dread. Mark continued his golf outings and job hunting charade, and I feigned belief in his increasingly transparent lies. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe in an hour." My heart raced as I made an excuse to leave work early. When I arrived at the cafe, Tom was already there, a thick manila envelope on the table in front of him. He slid the envelope across to me without further ado. With trembling hands, I opened it and began to look through the contents. There were photographs, credit card statements, hotel receipts, and transcripts of text messages. It was all there in black and white, irrefutable evidence of Mark and Lisa's betrayal. "How long?" I managed to choke out. Tom's voice was flat. At least 6 months, according to the investigator. Maybe longer. I felt like I might be sick. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of me working myself to the bone while Mark. There's more, Tom said quietly. Gina, you need to check your bank accounts. All of them. Confused, I pulled out my phone and logged into my banking app. What I saw made my blood run cold. My savings account, the one I'd been quietly building up for years as an emergency fund, was empty. With shaking fingers, I checked my credit card balance, which I had given Mark to pay for gasoline. Maxed out. He's been funding their little adventure with your money, Tom said, his voice tight with anger. Fancy dinners, hotel rooms, gifts for Lisa. All on your dime. The shock gave way to a fury I'd never experienced before. All those times I'd come home exhausted, all the extra hours I'd put in, all the sacrifices I'd made, and this is how Mark repaid me? What are you going to do? I asked Tom, my voice surprisingly steady. He leaned back, a cold smile on his face. I'm going to divorce Lisa and take her for everything she's worth. And then some. He paused, looking at me intently. The question is, what are you going to do, Gina? I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I want revenge, I said slowly. But I want them to suffer. I want them to feel as humiliated and betrayed as I do right now. Tom nodded approvingly. I was hoping you'd say that. I have an idea, but it's going to take some planning. Over the next hour, Tom and I hatched a plan. It was devious, it was cruel, and it was exactly what Mark and Lisa deserved. That night, when Mark came home, I greeted him with a smile. Hey, honey, I said, kissing his cheek. Listen, I was thinking, why don't we throw a party next weekend? To celebrate our friendship with Tom and Lisa. It's been a while since we all got together. Mark's eyes lit up. Yeah, that sounds fun. I'm sure Lisa would love to help plan it. As I turned away, ostensibly to start dinner, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Mark and Lisa had no idea that their perfect little world was about to come crashing down around them. The week leading up to the party was a masterclass in deception. I threw myself into the preparations with a manic energy, playing the role of the perfect hostess. I called Lisa daily, discussing menu plans and decorations, all while picturing the look on her face when her world fell apart. The day of the party arrived, and our house was transformed. I had outdone myself with the decorations and food, determined that everything should be perfect for the grand finale. Guests started arriving in the early evening. I played the gracious host, making small talk and ensuring everyone's glasses were full. Tom arrived alone, explaining that Lisa would be there shortly. She was picking up a special dessert. When Lisa finally swept in, she was the picture of domestic perfection. Her hair was immaculate, her dress flattering, and in her arms was an elaborate cake. Sorry I'm late, she trilled, air-kissing my cheek. I wanted everything to be just right. As the evening progressed, I watched Mark and Lisa carefully. To the casual observer, there was nothing untoward in their interactions. But now that I knew what to look for, their stolen glances and subtle touches were glaringly obvious. Finally, as the sky outside darkened, Tom stood up and clinked his glass for attention. Everyone, if I could have your attention please, he said, his voice carrying across the room. Gina and I have prepared a little entertainment for you all. If you'd like to gather outside, we've set up a screen for an interesting film. There was a murmur of excitement as our guests filed out onto the back lawn. Mark looked at me, confused. What's this about? He asked. I smiled sweetly. Oh, just a little trip down memory lane. Come on, you don't want to miss this. Outside, everyone settled onto blankets and chairs, facing the large screen we'd set up. Tom started the projector, and at first, it showed innocent scenes, the four of us on various outings, laughing and having fun. I saw Lisa relax, probably thinking this was just a sentimental slideshow. How wrong she was. Suddenly, the music changed, becoming darker, more ominous. The images on the screen shifted, showing Mark and Lisa in various compromising positions, leaving hotels together, kissing in a car, entering our house when I was at work. A collective gasp went up from the audience. I heard Lisa's mother let out a strangled cry. Mark jumped to his feet. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. I stood up slowly, my voice ice cold as I addressed the stunned crowd. "This, ladies and gentlemen, is what betrayal looks like." While Tom and I worked ourselves to the bone, our spouses were carrying on an affair behind our backs. Lisa was sobbing now, mascara running down her face. "Gina, please, I can explain." "Explain?" I cut her off. "Explain how you've been sleeping with my husband for months. Explain how you've been spending my hard-earned money on your little trysts." Tom stepped forward, his face grim. "Lisa, don't bother coming home. I've already changed the locks. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." The party dissolved into chaos. Guests were whispering furiously among themselves. Lisa's parents were berating her, her father's face purple with rage. As the shocked murmurs of the guests subsided, I steeled myself for what I knew I had to do next. I walked back into the house, retrieved the manila envelope from my desk drawer, and returned to the lawn. Mark was still standing there, looking shell-shocked and pale. I thrust the envelope into his hands. "Here are the divorce papers, Mark. I want you out of my house tonight, and I'll be demanding compensation from both you and Lisa for your betrayal." Mark fumbled with the envelope, his hands shaking. "Gina, please, we can talk about this. I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," I cut him off coldly. "You've said enough with your actions. Now leave." He stood there, divorce papers in hand, looking as if he'd been slapped. Guests were approaching me, offering sympathetic words and support. In the middle of the lawn, Lisa had sunk to her knees, mascara running down her face as she pleaded with Tom. "Please, Tom, don't divorce me. I made a mistake. We can work through this." To my surprise, Mark rushed over to Lisa. He grabbed her arm and hissed, "Get up. Don't humiliate yourself like this. We can start over, make a new life together." Lisa's tear-streaked face contorted with fury. She yanked her arm away from Mark and spat. "Start over? With you? I don't need an unemployed man who can only pay compliments. I need someone who can actually support me." As the last of the guests trickled out, offering final words of support, Tom approached me. His face was a mask of controlled anger, but his voice was gentle when he spoke to me. "Gina, if you need any help, legal, financial, anything, please don't hesitate to call me. We're in this together, okay?" I nodded, grateful for his support. "Thank you, Tom. The same goes for you." As Tom left, I turned to Mark, who was standing alone, looking lost. "I want you gone by morning. Leave your keys on the kitchen counter." I turned my back on him and walked into the house, closing the door firmly behind me. Through the window, I watched as he slowly made his way down the driveway and out of sight. The house felt eerily quiet after the chaos of the evening. I sank onto the couch, emotionally and physically exhausted. Tears threatened to spill, but I held them back. I was sad, yes, mourning the death of my marriage and what I thought was a close friendship. But underlying that sadness was a sense of calm, even relief. For months, I had been carrying the weight of an unemployed, dissatisfied husband. I had worked myself to the bone, trying to keep our life afloat while he contributed nothing but complaints. Now, that burden was lifted. Yes, the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. In the weeks following the explosive revelation at the party, life took on a new rhythm. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the familiar routine of sales reports and client meetings. But unlike before, I made sure to maintain a healthier balance, reducing my overtime and actually using my vacation days. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Tom. He looked tired but determined. "Gina," he greeted me with a nod. "How are you holding up?" I managed a small smile. "I'm doing okay. How about you?" Any news? Tom's face hardened. The divorce is final. I kicked Lisa out of the house last week. I wasn't surprised, but I still felt a twinge of something. Not quite sympathy, but a sense of shared experience. How did she take it? He shrugged. Not well. Apparently, her parents meant what they said at the party. They refused to take her in or help her financially. I raised an eyebrow. Really? That seems harsh. They're old-fashioned. Adultery is a big deal to them. Tom sighed. Last I heard, she's working as a sales clerk at some department store downtown. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lisa, who had always looked down on my career, was now forced to work a job she would have considered beneath her. What goes around comes around, I suppose, I murmured. Tom nodded grimly. How are things with Mark? I rolled my eyes. He won't stop calling and texting. Keeps begging for another chance. But I feel nothing. The love, the trust, it's all gone. I can't imagine ever wanting to be with him again. We parted ways, and as I drove home, I reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The next day, I met with my lawyer to discuss the progress of my own divorce proceedings. She greeted me with a triumphant smile. Good news, Gina. The judge has reviewed the evidence, including the detective's report, and has ruled in our favor on all counts. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. What does that mean exactly? It means, my lawyer said, that Mark has been ordered to pay you substantial compensation for his infidelity. Moreover, he's required to repay every cent he took from your reserve account and credit card for his affair with Lisa. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt lighter than I had in years. With the compensation and repayment from Mark, I was able to pay off the remainder of my mortgage in one fell swoop. The house was now truly, fully mine. That evening, as I was celebrating my newfound financial freedom with a glass of wine, my phone buzzed. It was Mark, again. Gina, please, his message read. I know I messed up. But I love you. Can't we try to work things out? I'll do anything. I stared at the message for a long moment. Once, those words might have moved me. Now, they just left me cold. I typed out a response. Mark, stop contacting me. It's over. I don't love you anymore, and I don't want to try again. Please respect my decision and leave me alone. I hit send and then blocked his number. It felt final, decisive. And it felt good. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, that I was content with my newfound independence, fate threw me another curveball. It started innocently enough. Tom and I had been in regular contact since our respective divorces, offering each other support and companionship during this challenging time. One evening, about 2 months after my divorce was finalized, Tom called me. Hey Gina, he said, his voice warm. I was thinking. We'd both been through hell lately. How about we celebrate our new beginnings? I could bring over a bottle of wine, and we could toast to our freedom. I hesitated for a moment, but then thought, why not? Sure, Tom. That sounds nice. Come over around 8? When Tom arrived, bottle of expensive red wine in hand, I was struck by how different he looked. Gone was the stressed, angry man I'd seen at the fateful party. He seemed lighter, more relaxed. He'd even gotten a haircut that suited him well. We settled on my patio, the warm summer evening wrapping around us like a comfortable blanket. As we sipped our wine, our conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and moments of shared understanding. You know, Tom said, refilling our glasses, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually grateful for what happened. It opened my eyes to so much. I nodded, understanding completely. I know what you mean. It's like, we're finally free to be ourselves. As the night wore on and the wine bottle emptied, I found myself noticing things about Tom I'd never paid attention to before. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle timbre of his laugh, the strength in his hands as he gestured while talking. I'm not sure who made the first move. One moment we were laughing about some shared memory, and the next, we were kissing. That night, Tom and I crossed a line we'd never even considered before. When morning came, I woke up to find Tom already awake, watching me with a mixture of affection and uncertainty. "Gina," he said softly, "about last night." Last night was unexpected, but it felt right. Maybe we could date? Take things slow, see where this leads? I found myself nodding, a smile spreading across my face. "I'd like that, Tom." Over the next few weeks, Tom and I embarked on a new journey together. We went on proper dates, dinners, movies, long walks in the park. To my surprise, Tom revealed a romantic side I'd never seen before. He brought me flowers, left sweet notes for me to find, and always seemed to know just what to say to make me smile. "You know," I said to Tom one evening as we cuddled on my couch, "I never would have predicted this." He chuckled, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Life's full of surprises, isn't it? But I have to say, this is one surprise I'm very grateful for." As I snuggled closer to him, I found myself agreeing wholeheartedly. We weren't looking too far into the future yet, both of us knew the importance of living in the present. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about what that future might hold. I'm Amanda Pierce, 32 years old, born and raised in Miami. My life revolves around gems and jewelry, just like my parents and grandparents did. Pierce Gems, our family's boutique jewelry store, sits pretty in Miami's fancy shopping district. It's not just a store, it's my whole world. Growing up, I spent more time in the workshop than I did in playgrounds. While other kids were learning to ride bikes, I was learning to cut stones. My dad would sit me on his lap, his big, calloused hands guiding my smaller ones as we worked on a piece together. "Remember, Mandy," he'd say, his voice gruff but kind, "it's not just about making something pretty. It's about creating something that tells a story." Our family has a secret. No, we're not secretly royalty or anything like that. It's a technique for processing gems that makes them shine like nothing you've ever seen. This secret's been passed down for 3 generations, and it's what makes Pierce Gems special. "Guard this secret with your life, Amanda," my dad told me on my 21st birthday. "It's not just our past, it's our future." And I did. I guarded it fiercely. It was my responsibility, my burden, and my ticket to success in a world that often didn't take a young woman seriously. Pierce Gems wasn't just successful, it was thriving. We had a loyal clientele who appreciated the unique brilliance of our pieces. Other jewelers tried to figure out our secret, but none came close. The Gemstone Society's annual gala was always a glitzy affair, but that year, it felt different. Maybe it was the champagne, or maybe it was the way my new emerald dress hugged my curves, but I felt electric that night. I made my way through the crowd, nodding at familiar faces and exchanging pleasantries. The room was a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits, everyone dripping in jewels that probably cost more than my first car. "Amanda, darling, you look fabulous," gushed Marjorie, one of our regular clients. She grabbed my hands, her eyes zeroing in on the ring I was wearing. "Is this one of your new pieces? It's stunning." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "Just finished it last week. It's part of our new Midnight Sky collection." "I simply must have one," Marjorie declared. "I'll stop by the shop next week." As she fluttered off to gossip with her friends, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and found myself face to face with the most captivating pair of blue eyes I'd ever seen. "Excuse me," said the owner of those eyes, flashing a smile that could melt ice. I couldn't help but overhear. "You're Amanda Pierce, aren't you?" I nodded, suddenly feeling tongue-tied. "That's me. And you are?" "Jason Randfield," he replied, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard great things about your work." Randfield. The name hit me like a ton of bricks. The Randfields were jewelry royalty, owners of one of the largest jewelry empires in the country. And here was their heir, talking to me like I was the most interesting person in the room. "The pleasure's all mine," I managed to say, shaking his hand. "I didn't realize the Randfields would be here tonight." Jason laughed, a rich, warm sound that made me feel like we were sharing an inside joke. "We usually skip these events, but I insisted on coming this year. I've been following your work, Amanda. You're making waves in the industry." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. "That's very kind of you to say." "It's the truth," he said, his eyes twinkling. "In fact, I was hoping we could discuss a potential collaboration. How about dinner next week?" My heart skipped a beat. A collaboration with the Randfields could take Pierce Gems to the next level. But a small voice in the back of my head whispered a warning. The Randfields were our biggest competitors. Could they be trusted? I pushed the thought aside. This was business, nothing more. "Dinner sounds great," I heard myself say. Jason's smile widened. "Excellent. I'll have my assistant set it up." He glanced over my shoulder and frowned slightly. "I'm afraid I have to mingle, but I'm looking forward to our dinner, Amanda." As he walked away, I felt like I was floating. Jason Randfield had sought me out. Me, Amanda Pierce, the girl who spent more time with gems than people. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I danced, I laughed, I networked. But my mind kept drifting back to those blue eyes and that dazzling smile. Jason had chosen a trendy restaurant in South Beach, the kind of place where the who's who of Miami came to see and be seen. As I walked in, I spotted him immediately, looking impossibly handsome in a tailored suit. He stood up as I approached, his eyes lighting up. "Amanda," he said, taking my hand. "You look stunning." I felt a flutter in my stomach, but pushed it down. "Thank you, Jason. You clean up pretty well yourself." As we sipped our wine, the conversation flowed easily. We talked about our shared passion for jewelry, swapping stories about difficult clients and challenging designs. I found myself relaxing, drawn in by Jason's wit and charm. "So," I said, as our main courses arrived. "You mentioned a potential collaboration at the gala. What did you have in mind?" Jason leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I've been following your work for a while now, Amanda. The way you bring out the brilliance in gems, it's unlike anything I've seen before. I think a partnership between Pierce Gems and Randfield Jewelry could revolutionize the industry." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold statement. How exactly would this partnership work?" "We have the resources and the reach," Jason explained. "You have the skill and the innovation. Together, we could create a line that combines the best of both our worlds." It sounded tempting, I had to admit. But years of protecting our family secret made me cautious. "And what about our individual techniques? Our trade secrets?" Jason held up his hands. "Those would remain separate, of course. This would be about combining our strengths, not revealing our secrets." I nodded slowly, turning the idea over in my mind. "It's an interesting proposition. I'd need to think about it, discuss it with my team." "Of course," Jason said, his smile understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As dinner progressed, our conversation drifted from business to more personal topics. Jason told me about growing up in the shadow of the Randfield Empire, the pressure to live up to his family name. I found myself opening up about my own experiences, the weight of carrying on the Pierce legacy. Before I knew it, we were seeing each other regularly. Jason swept me off my feet with grand gestures and intimate moments. One weekend, he surprised me with a spontaneous trip to the Bahamas. "Pack a bag," he said, showing up at my door with a mischievous grin. "We're going on an adventure." I hesitated, thinking about the orders I needed to fill. "Jason, I can't just leave. I have work." He silenced me with a kiss. "The work will be there when you get back." "When's the last time you took a break, Amanda?" I couldn't remember, and that realization made me pause. Maybe he was right. Maybe I did need a break. the Bahamas were like a dream. We spent our days lounging on pristine beaches, snorkeling in crystal clear waters, and our nights dancing under the stars. It was intoxicating, being the center of Jason's attention. Back in Miami, our relationship continued to blossom. Jason would surprise me with rare orchids flown in from Thailand, their delicate petals reminding me of his thoughtfulness. We'd spend evenings at fancy restaurants or quiet nights in, talking for hours about everything and nothing. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The first time Jason took me to meet his parents, I felt like I'd stepped into a lion's den. Vivian Randfield, Jason's mother, looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "So, you're the little jeweler Jason's been spending so much time with," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. "That's right. Amanda Pierce, of Pierce Gems. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Randfield." Robert Randfield, Jason's father, was a bit warmer, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. "Pierce Gems," he mused. "You've been making quite a name for yourselves lately. Impressive for such a small operation." The dinner was a minefield of backhanded compliments and thinly veiled insults. At one point, Vivian accidentally spilled her red wine on my dress. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, not sounding sorry at all. "I suppose your hands must be too rough from all that manual labor to hold delicate glassware properly." I plastered on a smile even as I seethed inside. "No worries, Mrs. Randfield. Accidents happen." Jason squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. Later, as he drove me home, he apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry about my parents," he said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "They can be difficult." I sighed, looking out at the Miami skyline. "It's okay. I'm sure they're just protective of you." Jason shook his head. "It's not okay. You're important to me, Amanda. They need to accept that." His words warmed my heart, pushing away the lingering chill from his parents' cold reception. As weeks turned into months, I found myself falling harder for Jason. He was everything I'd never known I wanted: charming, worldly, and seemingly head over heels for me. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and appreciated for more than just my craft. We'd been dating for about 8 months when he surprised me with a trip to Paris. "Pack your bags, darling," he said, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "We're off to the city of love." And so I found myself in Paris, strolling hand in hand with Jason along the Seine, marveling at the architecture, and indulging in decadent French cuisine. It was like a dream. On our last night in Paris, Jason took me to dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant with a view of the Eiffel Tower. As we finished our dessert, he suddenly looked nervous. "Amanda," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. I can't imagine my life without you." He stood up, and to my shock, got down on one knee beside our table. The other diners gasped and turned to watch. "Amanda Pierce," Jason said, pulling out a small velvet box. "Will you marry me?" I stared at the ring in shock. It was beautiful, but a small part of me couldn't help but notice that it paled in comparison to my own creations. I pushed that thought aside, focusing instead on the man kneeling before me, his eyes full of hope and love. "Yes," I heard myself say. "Yes, I'll marry you." When we returned to Miami, reality came crashing back. Jason's parents insisted on throwing us an engagement party, and I found myself thrust into a world of high society that I'd only ever observed from the outside. The party was a lavish affair at the Randfield mansion. As I circulated among Miami's elite, I couldn't help but feel out of place. These people lived in a different world than I did, a world of old money and ingrained privilege. Vivian Randfield cornered me by the champagne fountain, her smile as sharp as a diamond-tipped saw. "Amanda, darling, I must say, we were all quite surprised when Jason announced your engagement. It's not often a Randfield marries outside our social circle." Before I could respond, Jason appeared at my side, placing a protective arm around my waist. "Mother, I hope you're not giving Amanda a hard time." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course not, darling. I was just welcoming Amanda to the family. Later that night, as Jason and I slow danced under the crystal chandeliers, he leaned in close. I have an idea, he whispered. Why don't you make a special piece for my mother? As a peace offering. Show her what you can do. I hesitated. The Pierce family secret wasn't something I shared lightly, even with my fiancé. But maybe Jason was right. Maybe this could be a way to bridge the gap between our two worlds. The weeks following our engagement were a whirlwind of wedding planning. I threw myself into creating the perfect necklace for Vivian, hoping it would be the olive branch that could finally win her over. I spent countless hours in my workshop, pouring my heart and soul into the piece. I used rare pink diamonds and a flawless blue sapphire from my father's private collection. It was to be my masterpiece, a testament to my skill and the Pierce family secret. One evening, as I was putting the finishing touches on the clasp, Jason stopped by the workshop. His eyes widened. Amanda, it's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. I felt a surge of pride. Do you think your mother will like it? Jason nodded, his eyes still fixed on the necklace. She'd be a fool not to. The way it catches the light, it's almost otherworldly. I smiled, pleased with his reaction. That's the Pierce touch. The next week, I was at the Randfield mansion for another wedding planning session. Suddenly, I heard raised voices coming from down the hall. I slipped out of the room and followed the sound of the voices. As I got closer, I could make out what they were saying. You're being ridiculous, Jason, came Robert's deep voice. This marriage is a golden opportunity. Don't tell me you're getting cold feet now. It's not like that, Jason protested. But nothing, Vivian's shrill voice cut in. You've done well, darling. She's eating out of the palm of your hand. Soon, we'll have everything we need. I edged closer to the partially open door, my heart pounding in my chest. Through the crack, I could see Jason pacing back and forth, sipping wine from a glass. You should see how eagerly she's making that necklace, he said, and I felt my world tilt on its axis. She has no idea she's handing over the keys to her entire legacy. Vivian's laugh pierced the air like a knife. And to think, we almost objected to you marrying that little nobody. I must say, Jason, your acting skills have improved tremendously. She actually believes you love her. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a gasp. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a mistake. But Robert's next words shattered any lingering doubt. Once we have the Pierce secret, we'll corner the market, he said, his voice filled with smug satisfaction. Who cares if her quaint little shop goes under? It's just business, after all. I felt like I was going to be sick. My vision blurred with unshed tears as the full weight of their betrayal hit me. Jason, the man I thought I loved, the man I had agreed to marry, had been using me all along. The days following my shocking discovery were a blur of emotions and careful planning. On the surface, I played the part of the excited bride-to-be perfectly. I gushed over flower arrangements, fretted about seating charts, and continued work on Vivian's necklace. But inside, I was seething with rage and plotting my revenge. How's the necklace coming along, darling? Jason asked one evening, wrapping his arms around me from behind as I worked in my studio. I fought the urge to flinch away from his touch. Almost done, I replied, forcing a smile. Your mother is going to love it. Late into the night, after Jason had gone home, I began creating a new collection. Each piece was a work of art, telling the story of betrayal through intricate designs and carefully chosen gems. But jewelry wasn't my only focus. One day, I broke into Jason's home computer and downloaded all the files I could find. I spent hours poring over the Randfield Company documents, looking for any discrepancies or signs of wrongdoing. It was tedious work, but my determination fueled me. One night, as I was going through a stack of financial reports, something caught my eye. The Randfields had been systematically replacing high-quality gems with cheaper alternatives in their jewelry, scamming their customers out of millions. The next challenge was gathering evidence of their plot against me. I bought a small, high-quality recording device and began carrying it with me everywhere. It felt dirty, but I reminded myself that they had started this game. I was just finishing it. As the final week before the wedding arrived, I put the finishing touches on my plan. I had evidence of the Randfields gem scam, recordings of their plot against me, and a collection that would shock Miami's elite to its core. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect Miami day. As I arrived at the beachfront venue, my heart was pounding, but my resolve was firm. I clutched my velvet-lined case, containing my new collection and all the evidence I'd gathered, like a lifeline. "Amanda, there you are." Jason's best man, Mark, called out as I entered. "Everyone's been looking for you. Are you ready?" I gave him a tight smile. "More ready than you know." As I was ushered into a private room to wait, I could hear the murmur of guests arriving outside. Miami's elite, all gathered to witness what they thought would be the society wedding of the year. If only they knew. The wedding march began to play, and I started my walk down the aisle. Faces turned to watch me, smiling and expectant. I saw Vivian and Robert in the front row, looking smug and satisfied. Jason waited at the altar, beaming at me. But as I reached the altar, instead of taking Jason's hand, I turned to face the assembled guests. "I'm afraid there won't be a wedding today," I announced, my voice clear and strong. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Jason's face contorted in confusion. "Amanda, what are you doing?" I ignored him, addressing the guests instead. "Instead, I'll be unveiling my newest collection, The Art of Betrayal." With that, I opened my case and began to pull out the pieces one by one, explaining the symbolism behind each one. The snake bracelet, representing deceit. The shattered diamond ring, symbolizing broken trust. The color-changing teardrop earrings, reflecting the shifting nature of lies. As I spoke, I saw understanding and horror dawn on the Randfields' faces. But I wasn't done yet. "And for the grand finale," I said, pulling out Vivian's necklace. "A special commission with a hidden message." I held it up to the light, revealing the word liar spelled out in pink diamonds. The crowd gasped again, this time in a mix of shock and admiration. "Amanda, stop this nonsense right now," Robert Randfield bellowed, his face red with anger. But I was beyond stopping. I pulled out the documents I'd gathered, the recordings I'd made. "The Randfields aren't just liars in love," I announced. "They're liars in business too." I proceeded to lay out the evidence of their gem scam, playing recordings of their plot against me and Pierce gems. With each revelation, the crowd's murmurs grew louder, shocked faces turning to the Randfields for explanation. "This is preposterous," Vivian shrieked, but her voice was shaking. As security began to escort the sputtering Randfields out, I addressed the crowd one final time. "I stand before you not as a bride, but as a businesswoman protecting her legacy. Pierce gems will continue to create beauty and brilliance, without compromising our integrity." The aftermath was chaos. Reporters who had come to cover a society wedding found themselves with a much bigger story. Photos of my triumphant face and stunning jewelry splashed across social media and magazines worldwide. In the days following what the press dubbed the wedding that wasn't, my life became a whirlwind of interviews, legal meetings, and damage control. The story had exploded beyond Miami, capturing national attention. My phone rang nonstop with calls from reporters, industry insiders, and even a few Hollywood producers interested in my story. I sat in my workshop, surrounded by half-finished pieces and stacks of newspapers, all featuring my face on the front page. The headlines ranged from "Jewel of Deception," "Heiress Exposes $1 Million Scam," to "Love, Lies, and Luxury, the Pierce Randfield Saga." The Randfield empire crumbled under the weight of the scandal, with multiple lawsuits filed against them. My best friend and now lawyer, Sarah, burst through the door, her arms full of more newspapers and legal documents. "Amanda," she said, dropping everything on my workbench. "We need to talk strategy. The press is having a field day, and we've got at least a dozen interview requests. Over the next few weeks, I carefully chose which interviews to give. I spoke about the importance of transparency in the jewelry business, the need for stricter regulations, and my vision for a more ethical industry. As the weeks turned into months, the media frenzy began to die down, but my resolve only grew stronger. I channeled my energy into pierced gems, pushing myself to create more innovative designs while maintaining our commitment to ethical sourcing. One evening, as I was locking up the shop, a woman approached me. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "Ms. Pierce," she said hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you." I tilted my head, confused. "Thank me? For what?" She smiled sadly. "I bought a Randfield piece for my 25th wedding anniversary. After your exposé, I had it appraised. Turns out, the stone wasn't nearly what they claimed it was. Thanks to you, I was able to get my money back." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I'm glad I could help." As she walked away, I realized that my actions had affected real people, not just faceless consumers. The scandal that had nearly destroyed me had instead become the catalyst for positive change. And I, Amanda Pierce, was just getting started. My name's Caroline, and I've been married to Mike for 5 years now. I work as a chef at a local restaurant, and I absolutely love it. Cooking's been my passion since I was a kid, and I've always dreamed of becoming a famous chef someday. Mike works as a sales manager for a small company. Our life together was pretty good, for the most part. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we managed to make it work. The only real thorn in my side was Mike's mother, Linda. She's a social worker, specializing in child safety assessments for the local administration. And let me tell you, she's a piece of work. From day one, Linda made it clear she didn't like me. Nothing I did was ever good enough for her. She'd always find something to criticize, whether it was my cooking, my appearance, or just the way I breathed. It was exhausting. The worst part was that Mike never stood up for me. He'd just sit there, silent, while his mother tore me apart. One day, I decided to confront Mike about his relationship with his mother. We were sitting in our living room after dinner, the TV droning on in the background. "Mike," I started, trying to keep my voice calm, "don't you think your mom's a bit harsh sometimes?" Mike's face hardened. "Look, Caroline, you don't understand. Mom's always been like this. She raised me and my brother on her own after Dad left. She had to be tough. But..." He cut me off. "She used to tell us that if we misbehaved, she'd give us away to other parents. It scared the hell out of us, but it worked. We learned to behave." I stared at him, shocked. That's terrible, Mike. You know that's not normal, right?" He shrugged. "It's just how things were. Mom did her best." I realized then that this was a battle I couldn't win. Mike was too deeply under his mother's influence. Years of manipulation and fear had left their mark. As if dealing with Linda wasn't bad enough, there was also the constant comparison to Sarah, my sister-in-law. Sarah was married to Mike's older brother, Tom. In Linda's eyes, Sarah could do no wrong. She was the perfect daughter-in-law, smart, talented, beautiful, and well-mannered. Everything I apparently wasn't. "Oh, Caroline," Linda would say during our family dinners, "did you hear about Sarah's latest achievement at work? She got another promotion. Isn't that wonderful?" I'd nod and smile, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. "That's great, Sarah. Congratulations." Sarah would beam, basking in the praise. "Thank you, Caroline. It's not much, really." But the worst part of these dinners wasn't the comparisons. It was the constant badgering about children. Linda was obsessed with the idea of grandchildren, and she made it her mission to remind me of my duty at every opportunity. "So, Caroline," she'd start, her eyes narrowing, "when are you and Mike planning on starting a family? You're not getting any younger, you know." I'd take a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. We're focusing on our careers right now, Linda. Children will come when we're ready. Linda would scoff. Career? Cooking isn't a career, dear. It's a hobby. A real woman knows her place is in the home, raising children. I'd feel my blood boil, but I'd bite my tongue. Getting into an argument wouldn't change anything. Mike, as usual, would stay silent, pushing food around his plate. Interestingly, Linda never bothered Sarah about having children. I found out why one day when Mike let it slip that Tom was infertile. It was a family secret, one that Linda guarded fiercely. She'd rather have no grandchildren than admit her precious firstborn had any flaws. Over time, Linda tightened her grip on her sons, insisting they help her with everything. And of course, that expectation extended to the daughters-in-law as well. Tom and Sarah lived nearby, so it was easier for them to cater to Linda's whims. But Mike and I lived further away and both worked late hours. We couldn't visit as often as Linda wanted, and boy, did she let us know how unhappy she was about it. "I might as well be dead for all you two care," she'd say dramatically over the phone. My own son and his wife, too busy to visit their poor, widowed mother. I'd roll my eyes, mouthing the words along with her. I'd heard this speech so many times I could recite it in my sleep. "We're sorry, Linda," I'd say, not feeling sorry at all. "We'll try to visit more often." But it was never enough. In Linda's world, we should be at her beck and call, 24/7. And of course, it was all my fault. I was the one bossing Mike around and keeping him from his familial duties. As the months went by, I threw myself into my work even more. The kitchen became my sanctuary, the only place where I felt truly valued and respected. Chef Paolo continued to mentor me, pushing me to expand my skills and creativity. "You have a gift, Caroline," he'd say, tasting my latest creation. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words were a balm to my battered self-esteem. In the kitchen, I wasn't the disappointing daughter-in-law or the wife who couldn't give her husband children. I was just Caroline, the talented chef with a bright future ahead of her. The day everything started to unravel began like any other. I was at work, up to my elbows in prep for the dinner rush, when my phone buzzed. It was Linda. I groaned internally, but answered anyway. "Hello, Linda. What can I do for you?" Her voice came through, sharp and demanding. "Caroline, I need you to come to the mall and pick me up. Sarah and I have been shopping, and we have too many bags for a taxi." I glanced at the clock. It was peak traffic time, and the mall was on the other side of town. "Linda, I'm at work. I can't just leave." "Oh, so your job is more important than family?" she interrupted. "I see how it is. I suppose I'll just have to struggle with all these bags myself. At my age, I could throw my back out, but don't you worry about that." I closed my eyes, counting to 10 in my head. "Fine, Linda. I'll be there as soon as I can." The traffic was a nightmare. I sat in gridlock for over an hour, my frustration mounting with each passing minute. By the time I finally reached the mall, I was a ball of stress and irritation. I circled the parking lot, looking for Linda and Sarah. They were nowhere to be seen. I called Linda's phone. No answer. I tried Sarah. Nothing. Finally, after my third attempt, Linda picked up. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep the annoyance out of my voice. "Oh, Caroline," Linda said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "We got tired of waiting, so we took a taxi home. I thought Sarah texted you." Before I could protest, she hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone in disbelief. Then I screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw, letting out all the frustration and anger I'd been bottling up for years. When I got home, Mike was already there. I stormed in, still seething from the day's events. "Your mother," I started, but Mike cut me off. I know. Mom told me what happened." "Why didn't you get there faster?" "She had to take a taxi, because of you." I stared at him, mouth agape. "Are you kidding me right now?" I left work early, sat in traffic for hours, and it's my fault? Mike shrugged. You know how mom is with waiting. You should have planned better. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and tense silences at home. Mike and I were barely speaking, the rift between us growing wider with each passing day. Then, one evening as I was closing up the kitchen, my phone rang. It was Linda again. I considered ignoring it, but I knew that would only lead to more drama. With a heavy sigh, I answered. Hello, Linda. Caroline, dear, she said, her voice sickly sweet. I need you to do me a favor. It's Sarah's birthday tomorrow. I'm throwing her a little party at my house. I need you to deliver food from your restaurant. The most expensive dishes, mind you. For 10 people. I felt my blood pressure rising. Linda, that's going to be extremely expensive. I can't just. Oh, don't be so stingy, she interrupted. It's for family. And of course, you'll be paying for it. Consider it your gift to Sarah. I nearly dropped the phone. You want me to pay for a gourmet meal for 10 people? Linda, that's insane. I can't afford that. She sked disapprovingly. Well, if you're going to be difficult about it, I suppose you could always cook the meal yourself and bring it over. That's what a real chef would do, isn't it? I closed my eyes, counting to 10 in my head. Linda, I work full-time. I don't have the energy to cook a gourmet meal for 10 people after a full shift. I see, she said, her voice cold. Well, I'll let Mike know how little you care about his family. Goodbye, Caroline. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling a mixture of rage and disbelief. When I got home, Mike was waiting for me, his face like a thundercloud. Mom called, he said without preamble. Why are you being so difficult about Sarah's birthday? Mom's right, you don't care about anyone but yourself. In the end, I caved. I couldn't face another argument, another night of cold silence. The next day, I placed the order at the restaurant, wincing as I handed over my credit card. It was a huge chunk of my savings, but what choice did I have? The following evening, Mike and I arrived at Linda's house for the party. I was exhausted from a long day at work, but I plastered on a smile as we entered. Linda greeted us at the door, all smiles for Mike and barely a glance for me. Oh, you're here. Come in, come in. Everyone's already started eating. We walked into the dining room, and I stopped short. The table was laden with food, but it wasn't the dishes I had ordered from the restaurant. Instead, there was an array of homemade dishes that looked, well, less than appetizing. What's going on? I asked, confused. Where's the food from the restaurant? Sarah looked up from her plate, smirking. Oh, didn't Mom tell you? I decided I wanted to cook for my own birthday. Isn't that right, Mom? Linda nodded, beaming at Sarah. Yes, and everything is just delicious. Sarah's such a talented cook. I stood there, speechless. Mike nudged me. Come on, let's sit down. Don't make a scene. Numbly, I took my seat. Mike chatted and laughed with everyone, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort. I caught Linda watching me several times, a satisfied smirk on her face. By the time we left, I was emotionally drained. In the car on the way home, I turned to Mike. Did you know about this? That Sarah was going to cook? He shrugged. Mom might have mentioned it. What's the big deal? I stared at him in disbelief. The big deal is that I spent a fortune on food that's now going to waste, Mike. And your mother knew that when she asked me to order it. You're overreacting, he said, not taking his eyes off the road. It was just a misunderstanding. But I knew better. This was no misunderstanding. It was a calculated move by Linda, another in her endless series of power plays. And once again, I was the loser. A couple of months passed, and the tension in our household had become almost unbearable. Mike and I were barely speaking, and when we did, it usually ended in an argument. I was spending more and more time at the restaurant, throwing myself into my work with a kind of desperate energy. One evening, as I was cleaning up after a long shift, Mike approached me with an unusually excited expression on his face. "Caroline," he said, his eyes bright, "I need your help with something important." I raised an eyebrow, curious despite myself. "What is it?" "It's Mom's birthday next month," he explained, "and I want to do something really special for her. Something that'll blow Tom's gift out of the water. Got any ideas?" I was about to shake my head when suddenly, a thought struck me. I remembered overhearing Chef Paolo talking about an upcoming event at the restaurant. "Actually," I said slowly, "I might have an idea. On your mom's birthday, there's going to be a special event at the restaurant. They're filming an episode of that cooking show your mom loves. You know, the one with that presenter she's always going on about?" Mike's eyes widened. "No way. Are you serious?" I nodded, feeling a small spark of excitement despite myself. "Yeah. We could book a table for that night. If we're lucky, we might even get to be part of the filming. It's happening in the next room over from the main dining area." Mike's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Caroline, that's perfect. Mom would absolutely love that. She's always wanted to meet that presenter." For a moment, I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. It was nice to see Mike so happy, and for once, to be the source of that happiness. "We should keep it a surprise," I suggested, getting caught up in the moment. "Can you imagine her face when she realizes where she is and what's happening?" Mike nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. We'll keep it completely under wraps. She won't suspect a thing." We spent the next hour planning out the details. I would book the table and arrange everything at the restaurant. Mike would handle getting Linda there without spoiling the surprise. The next day, I spoke to Chef Paolo about booking the table and explained the situation. He was more than happy to help, even offering to put us at one of the best tables in the house. The day of Linda's birthday arrived, and I woke up feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. As I was getting ready, Mike approached me with an odd expression on his face. "Hey, I think I'll go pick up Mom myself," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Why don't you head to the restaurant on your own? I'll meet you there with Mom." I frowned, a little taken aback. "Oh, okay. What time should I arrive?" "Just stick to the reservation time," Mike said quickly. "I'll handle everything else." I noticed Mike leaving much earlier than necessary, but I brushed it off. Maybe he had some last-minute preparations to take care of. When I arrived at the restaurant at the appointed time, my heart sank. Through the window, I could see that the dining room was already full. Our family and several guests were seated at the largest table, laughing and talking animatedly. They looked like they'd been there for quite some time. I entered, my steps faltering as I approached the table. My usual place next to Mike was occupied by one of Linda's friends. I stood there, feeling like a ghost at my own party. "Hello, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They barely glanced at me, continuing their conversations as if I weren't there. The only one who acknowledged me was Linda, who gave me a smug smile before turning back to her guests. I turned to Mike, confusion and hurt swirling inside me. "What's going on?" "I thought we were surprising your mother together." Mike finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Caroline, we're tired of all the drama. Mom's birthday should be a happy occasion, without any arguments or tension. We thought it would be better this way." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Better? You mean, better without me?" Before Mike could respond, Linda chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, Caroline, dear. Didn't Mike tell you? We decided to have a little family gathering. Just the people who really matter." I felt my face burning with humiliation. That's when I noticed the camera crew in the corner, filming the whole scene. Linda, oblivious to their presence, continued her tirade. "You know, it's probably for the best that you haven't given Mike any children," she said loudly. "A barren, useless woman like you shouldn't be a mother. If you ever do manage to have a child, I'll make sure it's taken away and given to Sarah. She'd be a much better mother." Sarah, Mike's sister-in-law, giggled as Linda patted her head approvingly. Linda was on a roll now, playing to her audience. "You should see some of the cases I deal with at work. Women like Caroline, thinking they can have it all, a career and a family. Huh. I take their children away and give them to real families, families with proper values." The guests nodded and murmured in agreement, shooting me mocking looks. I stood there, frozen, as Linda continued to spew her venom. I felt a deep sense of shame, not for myself, but for this woman who could be so cruel, so callous. "I'm not hungry," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Enjoy your dinner." As I turned to leave, I heard Linda's laughter, followed by the laughter of her guests. The sound followed me out of the restaurant, echoing in my ears like a twisted symphony. I arrived home, my mind still reeling from the events at the restaurant. Without thinking, I started pulling clothes from the closet, stuffing them haphazardly into a suitcase. I couldn't stay here anymore, not after what had just happened. As I was frantically packing, my phone rang. It was James, the restaurant administrator. I almost didn't answer, but something in me made me pick up. "Caroline," James's voice was urgent. "You need to check the social media page for that cooking show that was filming at the restaurant today. Now." Curiosity overcame my desire to flee. I opened my laptop and found the page. What I saw made my jaw drop. There, front and center, was a video of Linda. But it wasn't the polished, put-together Linda she usually presented to the world. This was Linda in all her ugly glory, spewing venom about me, about how she abused her position to take children from their mothers. The video had hundreds of thousands of views already, and the comments section was on fire. She should be fired immediately. How can someone so cruel work with children? Poor Caroline, having to deal with such a monster of a mother-in-law. Before I knew what I was doing, I was in my car, driving back to the restaurant. I burst through the doors, my heart pounding. Linda was still there, chatting animatedly with the show's presenter. When she saw me, her face twisted with annoyance. "Why are you back?" she hissed. "Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough for one night?" Without a word, I thrust my phone in front of her face, the damning video playing on the screen. Linda's face drained of color as she watched herself, her own words, condemning her. What is this?" she sputtered. Then, turning to the presenter, she shrieked. "You! Take this down immediately. I'll sue you for everything you've got." The presenter just laughed. "I could take it down, sure. But it's already been shared thousands of times. You're viral, Linda. Congratulations on your newfound fame." Linda's face contorted with rage. She began grabbing plates off the table, hurling them to the floor. "I'll ruin you," she screamed. "I'll ruin all of you." "Oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you," the presenter said calmly. "We're still live, you see. Your little tantrum is being broadcast to the whole country right now." Linda froze, her face a mask of horror. The other guests at the table sat in stunned silence, looking as if they wanted the ground to open up and swallow them. James appeared at my side, his face grim. "I'm going to have to ask you all to leave," he said firmly. "Now. Or I'll be forced to call the police." As Linda and her entourage disappeared into the night, the presenter turned to me, a sympathetic smile on his face. "Caroline, isn't it?" he said. "Would you mind if we had a quick chat on camera? I think our viewers would love to hear your side of the story." I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. As the camera turned to me, I took a deep breath. This was my chance to tell my truth, to reclaim my narrative. The aftermath of Linda's public meltdown was swift and merciless. Within days, she was fired from her job in disgrace, her years of manipulating the system finally catching up with her. The influential position she'd wielded like a weapon was gone, along with the respect she'd commanded in society. As for me, I wasted no time. The very next day, I filed for divorce. Mike came to me, his eyes red and pleading, begging for forgiveness. "Caroline, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I made a terrible mistake. We can work this out, I promise. I'll stand up to Mom, I'll be better." I looked at him, feeling a mixture of pity and resolve. "It's too late, Mike. You had years to stand up for me, to be a real partner. But you chose your mother over me every single time." The divorce was surprisingly quick. We didn't have much to divide, and Mike, perhaps out of guilt, didn't contest anything. Just like that, 5 years of marriage were dissolved, reduced to nothing more than a signature on a piece of paper. But as one chapter of my life closed, another one opened up in ways I never could have imagined. Chef Paolo approached me a week after the incident. "Caroline," he said, a broad smile on his face, "I've got some news for you. The owner was impressed with how you handled everything. We want to make you the head chef of our restaurant in the city center." It wasn't just the promotion. TV shows started calling, wanting me as a guest. At first, they just wanted me to cook, but soon they were asking me to speak about my experiences, about self-respect and the importance of love in family relationships. I started a YouTube channel, sharing recipes and life advice. The comments section was filled with messages from people who had been through similar experiences, thanking me for giving them the courage to stand up for themselves. One day, my agent, yes, I had an agent now, called with exciting news. "Caroline, I've got multiple offers for you to host your own TV show on cable. Are you interested?" I couldn't believe it. Me, with my own TV show? It was beyond anything I'd ever dreamed of. As for my former family, well, I heard things through the grapevine. Linda's influence over her sons was waning. Sarah, my former sister-in-law, who had always been Linda's golden child, now openly despised her mother-in-law. Funny how quickly things change when the true nature of a person is revealed. Some people asked if I felt sorry for them, if I regretted how things had turned out. The truth is, I didn't. They had made their choices, just as I had made mine. The difference was, I could look myself in the mirror each morning and be proud of the person I saw. I'm Tiffany, and 10 years ago, I was a bright-eyed tour guide with dreams of exploring the world. That all changed when I met Jack. Jack was charming, successful, and swept me off my feet. We married quickly, and I thought I had it all. Then came the job offer that would change everything. "Tiff, I've been offered a position with an amazing law firm," Jack said one night over dinner. "That's great, honey. Where?" "It's in another city. We'd have to move." My heart sank. I loved my job, but I loved Jack more. "What about my work?" Jack's face hardened. "Come on, Tiff. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You can find work anywhere." I hesitated, but his excitement was contagious. "You're right. We'll make it work." We moved to a big house in a new city. At first, it was exciting. But as the boxes were unpacked, so was a new version of Jack I'd never seen before. "The house is a mess," he snapped one day, looking around our half-unpacked living room. "I'm working on it," I said, gesturing to the boxes. "Work faster. I can't live like this." I was taken aback, but brushed it off. He was under stress from the new job, I told myself. Weeks passed, and I struggled to find work. "Maybe I should look for a tour guide position here," I suggested one evening. Jack laughed. "Don't be ridiculous. You need to focus on the house. It's still not up to par." "But I want to work, Jack. I miss it." He stood up, towering over me. "I'm the one working, Tiffany. Your job is here, making sure everything is perfect for me. Got it?" I nodded, fighting back tears. This wasn't the man I married, but I was determined to make it work. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would last for years. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, I found myself trapped in a routine of endless housework and walking on eggshells. Jack's demands grew more unreasonable, and his temper shorter. One day, I suggested hiring a housekeeper to help with the workload. Jack's face turned red. "Are you kidding me? You want to waste my hard-earned money on something you should be doing? This is your job, Tiffany. If you can't handle it, maybe you're not cut out to be my wife." His words stung, but I swallowed my pride. "You're right, I'm sorry. I'll try harder." And try harder I did. I threw myself into being the perfect housewife, hoping it would bring back the man I fell in love with. But the more I did, the more Jack expected. As his career soared, our relationship plummeted. I watched from the sidelines as he became a celebrated lawyer, all while I faded into the background, a ghost in my own home. As the years passed, I became a master of social media management, running Jack's accounts from behind the scenes. It was ironic, I crafted the image of a successful, happy couple while living a lie. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Jack stormed in, slamming the door. "Rough day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Shut up and get my food ready," he snapped. I quickly plated the meal I'd spent hours preparing. Jack took one bite and spat it out. "This is disgusting. Can't you do anything right?" Before I could respond, he swept the plate off the table. It shattered on the floor, food splattering everywhere. "Clean it up," he growled, standing over me as I knelt to pick up the broken pieces. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't dare let them fall. This had become our new normal. The next day, determined to do better, I spent hours cooking Jack's favorite dish. As I set the table, I realized with horror that I'd forgotten the bread. Jack walked in, loosening his tie. "Where's my food?" "Coming right up," I said, hurrying to serve the soup. He sat down, looked at the table, and exploded. "Where's the bread? Are you really this incompetent?" In one swift motion, he knocked the bowl off the table. Hot soup splashed across my leg, and I couldn't hold back a scream of pain. "God, you're so stupid," Jack muttered, leaving me alone with the mess and my burning skin. As I cleaned, sobbing quietly, a thought hit me like a thunderbolt. How did I let it get this bad? When did I become the shell of a person? The next morning, I woke up with a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I couldn't live like this anymore. "Jack," I said as he was about to leave for work, "I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce." He turned slowly, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "A divorce? You?" He laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Listen carefully, Tiffany. If you leave me, I'll destroy you. You'll have nothing, no money, no reputation, nothing. You'll end up on the streets with the other worthless people." My breath caught in my throat. I'd seen the homeless in our city, their desperate faces haunting me. Could that really be my fate? "Face it," Jack continued, "you're nothing without me. Remember that." As he left, slamming the door behind him, I sank to the floor. He was right, I had no money of my own, no career, nothing. But I also knew I couldn't keep living like this. That day marked a turning point. I might not have had the courage to leave yet, but I started planning. I began secretly recording our interactions, saving abusive texts, and documenting everything. If I was going to escape, I needed proof. As I continued to document Jack's abuse, his career reached new heights. He won a high-profile case, and decided to celebrate at home with colleagues and friends. "You'll prepare everything," he ordered. "And don't even think about ordering in. I want it all homemade." For days, I worked tirelessly. I cleaned every inch of our house, prepared an array of dishes, and made sure everything was perfect. The night of the party arrived, and I was exhausted but ready. Jack came home early, carrying a bottle of wine. "Here," he said, pouring me a glass. "You look like you could use this." I was surprised by his gesture, but accepted gratefully. The wine tasted odd, but I chalked it up to my fatigue. Jack barely touched his glass. "Go change," he said. "Guests will be here soon." I headed upstairs, suddenly feeling dizzy. By the time I reached our bedroom, the room was spinning. I collapsed onto the bed, consciousness fading fast. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows. Confused and groggy, I made my way downstairs. Jack's mother, Margaret, was in the kitchen. Her face contorted with disgust when she saw me. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," she sneered. "You should be ashamed of yourself." What happened?" I asked, my head pounding. "What happened? You got drunk and embarrassed my son in front of all his colleagues, that's what happened." Margaret's voice rose with each word. "He had to call me to help entertain because his wife was passed out drunk upstairs." I felt sick. "No, that's not possible. I only had one glass of wine." "Oh, save it," Margaret cut me off. "I always knew you weren't good enough for my Jack. Now everyone knows what a mess you are." As Margaret continued her tirade, fragments of memory surfaced. The strange taste of the wine. Jack barely drinking his. The sudden onset of dizziness. "He drugged me," I whispered to myself, the realization hitting me like a truck. After Margaret left, I sat at the kitchen table, my mind racing. Jack was systematically destroying my reputation. If I tried to leave now, who would believe me? That day, I stepped up my efforts. I bought a new phone and hid it carefully. I started recording everything, Jack's drunken rants, his 3 a.m. cleaning demands, every insult and threat. One incident I recorded stood out painfully in my memory. It was my birthday, and I had hoped Jack might remember, might show a glimmer of the man I once loved. I prepared a special dinner, holding on to a foolish hope for a peaceful evening. Jack stumbled in late, reeking of alcohol. I hit record on my hidden phone as he entered the kitchen. "What's all this?" he slurred, eyeing the carefully set table. It's my birthday, Jack." "I made dinner," I said softly. He laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. "Your birthday? Who cares? Look at you, you fat cow. You don't deserve a celebration." I felt each word like a physical blow, but kept the camera rolling as he continued his tirade. "And this?" he gestured at the food. "This is slop. You call yourself a wife? Can't even cook a decent meal." He swept the plates off the table, food splattering across the floor I'd scrubbed meticulously earlier. I flinched but didn't move, letting the camera capture every moment of his drunken cruelty. Another night, the recording caught an even more bizarre incident. It was 3 a.m. when Jack shook me awake roughly. "Get up," he hissed, pulling me out of bed. "What's wrong?" I asked, disoriented and frightened. "I found dust. The house is filthy. Clean it. All of it. Now." For hours, I scrubbed every surface of our home, Jack following behind, inspecting my work with a critical eye. All the while, my phone recorded from its hidden spot, capturing his relentless demands and my exhausted compliance. These recordings became my secret weapons, concrete evidence of the abuse I endured. Each file was carefully saved and backed up, a digital archive of my suffering and, ultimately, my path to freedom. Meanwhile, I heard the whispers when we were out. Saw the looks of contempt from Jack's friends. But I kept smiling, playing the role of the perfect wife while secretly fighting for my freedom. Our wedding anniversary was approaching. Despite everything, a small part of me hoped things might improve. But I should have known better. The night of our anniversary, Jack came home in high spirits. "I booked us a table at the best restaurant in town," he announced. "Let's celebrate." I was wary, but agreed. Before we left, Jack handed me a glass of lemonade. "I made it myself," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Alarm bells rang in my head. I pretended to drink, but when Jack stepped out to make a call, I quickly poured it into a nearby plant. As we drove to the restaurant, I felt myself getting drowsy. I fought to stay awake, but my eyes were so heavy. The next thing I knew, I was being roughly pulled from the car. Through half-closed eyes, I saw Jack sneering down at me. "This is where you belong," he spat, throwing my purse far into the darkness. with the other worthless people. I heard the car door slam, tires screeching as Jack sped away. My heart raced as I took in my surroundings. Trash littered the streets, and shadowy figures lurked in the darkness. The sound of distant gunshots made me flinch. I was alone, dressed up and wearing jewelry, in the most dangerous part of town. Jack's plan was clear. He hoped I'd fall victim to the criminals who called this area home. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to think. I spotted a small convenience store, its flickering neon sign a beacon of hope in this desolate place. I ran towards it, my heels clacking on the cracked pavement. Bursting through the door, I startled the woman behind the counter. "Please," I gasped, "I need help. Can I use your phone?" The woman, her name tag read Rosa, looked at me with a mix of concern and suspicion. "What happened to you, honey?" In a rush, I explained my situation. Rosa's eyes widened, and without a word, she locked the store's front door. "Can't have any troublemakers coming in," she explained, handing me her cell phone. "Make your call, sweetie. You're safe here." With shaking hands, I dialed my friend Sarah's number, silently thanking my good memory. Sarah answered on the third ring. "Sarah, it's Tiffany. I need help," I said, my voice breaking. "Tiff? What's wrong? Where are you?" I gave her the store's address, and she gasped. "That's the worst neighborhood in the city." "What are you doing there?" "Jack, he left me here. Please, can you come get me?" "I'm on my way. Don't move." As I waited, Rosa kept me company, her kindness a stark contrast to the cruelty I'd become accustomed to. "Thank you," I said as Sarah's car pulled up outside. "You may have saved my life tonight." I slipped off the expensive ring Jack had given me years ago. "Here, please take this." "It's not much, but..." Rosa shook her head. "Keep it, honey. Use it to start your new life." Tears in my eyes, I hugged her before rushing out to Sarah's car. As we drove away, Sarah turned to me. "Tiff, this has to stop. You need to fight back." "How?" I asked, feeling defeated. "He has all the power, all the connections." "Not all of them," Sarah said firmly. "I have a friend who works in television. It's time to tell your story." The next few days were a whirlwind. Sarah's friend, a producer named Lisa, arranged for me to appear on a popular talk show. The lights were blinding as I walked onto the set. The host, a kind-faced woman named Angela, greeted me warmly. "Tiffany, thank you for being here," she said. "Can you tell us your story?" Taking a deep breath, I began to speak. I told them everything: the years of emotional abuse, the manipulation, the incident in the bad neighborhood. As I spoke, I saw the shock and sympathy on the audience's faces. "Why are you coming forward now?" Angela asked. "Because I can't be silent anymore," I replied, my voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "There are so many women out there suffering in silence, thinking they're alone. I want them to know they're not." As the show ended, my phone exploded with notifications. My story had struck a chord, and people were rallying behind me. But amidst the supportive messages, one text made my blood run cold. It was from Jack. "You'll regret this, you lying scum. I'll destroy you." I showed the message to Sarah, my hands shaking. "Don't worry," she said, a determined glint in her eye. "He just made his biggest mistake. We've got him now." As we left the studio, I realized this was just the beginning. The real battle was about to start, and for the first time in years, I felt ready to fight. The days following my TV appearance were a blur of activity. My phone rang constantly with calls from journalists, lawyers, and women's rights advocates. Jack's threats continued, but each one only strengthened my resolve. One morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Tiffany?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Amanda Reeves. I'm a lawyer, and I'd like to help you with your case." I hesitated. "I appreciate the offer, but I can't afford a lawyer." "You misunderstand," Amanda said. My firm wants to take your case pro bono. We've been looking for a way to take down Jack Peterson for years. Your story could be the key. It turned out that Jack had made many enemies over the years. Amanda's firm represented several clients who had lost cases to him, some under suspicious circumstances. They saw my case as an opportunity to not only help me, but to expose Jack's unethical practices. I met with Amanda and her team the next day. As I shared my evidence, the recordings, the text messages, everything, their eyes widened. "This is gold," Amanda said, reviewing the files. "With this, we can not only win your divorce case, but potentially get Jack disbarred." The divorce proceedings began, and Jack came out swinging. He painted a picture of me as an alcoholic, unfaithful wife who was trying to ruin his reputation out of spite. "Your Honor," Jack's lawyer argued, "Mrs. Peterson has a history of erratic behavior and substance abuse. These allegations are nothing more than the desperate actions of a woman trying to extort money from her hard-working husband." I watched as Jack's mother, Margaret, took the stand, tearfully recounting instances of my supposed drunken behavior, including the night of Jack's work party. "She was a disgrace," Margaret sobbed. "My poor son has suffered so much because of her." I felt sick listening to their lies, but Amanda squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Don't worry," she whispered. "We're just getting started." When it was our turn to present evidence, Amanda was ruthless. She played the recordings of Jack's abuse, showed the threatening text messages, and presented a timeline of his escalating behavior. "And now," Amanda said, "I'd like to call Sarah Thompson to the stand." Sarah recounted the night she picked me up from the dangerous neighborhood, her testimony corroborating my story. "Objection," Jack's lawyer shouted. "This is hearsay." "Overruled," the judge said. "Continue, Ms. Thompson." Next, Amanda called Rosa, the convenience store clerk, to testify. Rosa described my state when I entered her store that night, and how she had to lock the door for my safety. Jack's face grew redder with each testimony. I could see him seething, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. The final blow came when Amanda presented a toxicology report. "Your Honor, we had Mrs. Peterson's hair tested for long-term drug exposure. The results show traces of sedatives, consistent with her account of being drugged by Mr. Peterson." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Jack leapt to his feet, shouting, "She's lying. You can't believe this." "Mr. Peterson, control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt," the judge warned. As the evidence mounted, I saw the change in people's faces. The doubt was replaced by shock and sympathy. Even some of Jack's friends in the gallery looked disgusted. The judge called a recess to review all the evidence. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught Jack's eye. For the first time, I saw fear there. The courtroom was packed as we reconvened for the judge's decision. The tension was palpable, and I could feel Jack's glare burning into the back of my head. Judge Harris cleared his throat. "After careful consideration of all evidence presented, this court finds in favor of Mrs. Tiffany Peterson." A collective gasp filled the room. I sat there, stunned, as the judge continued. "Mr. Jack Peterson is hereby ordered to pay alimony, surrender 50% of all joint property, and provide financial compensation for emotional damages. Furthermore, Mr. Peterson will cover all legal costs associated with this case." Jack exploded. "This is outrageous. I'll appeal. You can't do this to me." "Mr. Peterson," the judge's voice boomed, "I suggest you control yourself. Given the evidence presented, you should consider yourself lucky that criminal charges haven't been filed." As Jack was forcibly calmed by his lawyer, the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Peterson, this court is imposing a restraining order against Mr. Peterson. He is not to approach you or contact you through any means. Do you understand?" I nodded, tears of relief streaming down my face. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I moved out of the house I had once considered a prison, into a small but cozy apartment. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But Jack wasn't done. Despite the restraining order, he found ways to make his presence felt. Mutual acquaintances would relay his threats, and I'd occasionally spot his car driving by my new place. "We need to do something," Sarah said one evening as we were having coffee. "He's not going to stop." I nodded, an idea forming. "You're right. And I think I know how to end this once and for all." I still had access to Jack's social media accounts. He'd been too arrogant to change the passwords, probably assuming I wouldn't dare touch them. It was time to use that against him. Over the next few days, I meticulously documented our entire divorce process on his accounts. I shared court transcripts, audio clips, and my own story. The response was overwhelming. Jack's carefully crafted public image crumbled overnight. His firm, unwilling to be associated with the scandal, asked for his resignation. Clients dropped him in droves. When Jack realized what was happening, he went ballistic. He showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. "You scum," he screamed. "I'll kill you for this." I called the police, and they arrived quickly. Jack was arrested for violating the restraining order, his threats caught on my phone's voice recorder. As they led him away, I saw the man I had once loved, now a shell of himself, broken by his own cruelty and arrogance. In the following months, I heard through the grapevine that Jack had moved to another state, trying to rebuild his career. But his reputation followed him, and he struggled to find work. As for me, I was rebuilding too, but in a much different way. The publicity from the case led to an opportunity one never expected. A local charity that helped women escape abusive relationships reached out to me. "We'd like you to come work with us," the director said. "Your experience could help so many women." I accepted without hesitation. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose. I was using my pain to help others, and in doing so, I was healing myself. 1 year after the trial, I stood in front of a room full of women, all survivors like me. As I shared my story, I saw hope rekindling in their eyes. "Remember," I told them, "you are stronger than you know. Your story matters. And you are not alone." As I looked out at their faces, I realized that this moment, this purpose, was what I had been fighting for all along. Not just my freedom, but the chance to help others find theirs. As months passed, my work at the charity became more than just a job, it became my calling. I found myself connecting with women from all walks of life, each with their own harrowing stories of abuse and survival. One day, a young woman named Emily came to our center. Her story was painfully familiar: a controlling husband, isolation from friends and family, and a deep-seated fear of leaving. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with Emily, helping her create a safety plan and build up her confidence. When she finally left her husband, the look of relief on her face was all too familiar. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "You saved my life." Her words hit me hard. In helping her, I realized I was also continuing to heal myself. As our center's reputation grew, we started receiving invitations to speak at conferences and events. At first, the idea terrified me. Public speaking had never been my forte, and the thought of sharing my story with large audiences made my palms sweat. But Sarah, ever my rock, encouraged me. "Tiff, your story could help so many people. You've got to do this." My first speaking engagement was at a local university. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, I felt a surge of strength I didn't know I possessed. "My name is Tiffany," I began, "and this is my story of survival." As I spoke, I saw the impact my words were having. Students leaned forward in their seats, some wiping away tears, others nodding in understanding or clenching their fists in anger at what I'd endured. After the talk, a line of people formed to speak with me. Many shared their own experiences or those of loved ones. Others simply wanted to offer support. That night, as I lay in bed reflecting on the day, I felt a profound sense of purpose. My past, painful as it was, had become a tool for change. The speaking engagements continued, taking me across the country. I spoke at universities, women's shelters, and even a TEDx event. Each time, I drew strength from the audience, from the knowledge that my words might be the lifeline someone needed. During this time, I also started writing a book about my experiences. It was a grueling process, forcing me to relive some of my darkest moments. But it was also cathartic, allowing me to process my trauma in a new way. The day my book was published was surreal. Seeing my name on the cover, my story laid bare for the world to read, filled me with a mix of terror and pride. To my amazement, the book resonated with people. It climbed the bestseller lists, and I soon found myself doing interviews on national television. During one such interview, the host asked me a question that made me pause. "Tiffany, after everything you've been through, do you have any regrets?" I thought for a moment before answering. I regret the years I lost to fear and abuse. But I don't regret my journey. Every step, every struggle, led me to where I am now, able to help others find their strength. So no, I wouldn't change a thing. As I continued my work, I realized that my story was far from over. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities to grow and to help others. The scared, silenced woman I once was had become a voice for the voiceless, a beacon of hope for those still trapped in the darkness I had escaped.